An eyewitness identification, perhaps the most persuasive evidence a jury can hear.
The victim was held for nearly an hour in close confines.
She seemed very certain that Neil Miller was the person.
But is the mind reliable?
Memory is a reconstitutive process.
She simply cooperated with the suggestion.
Desperate to prove his innocence, a young man reaches out to a team of lawyers dedicated to freeing the innocent.
There weren't too many people that believed me.
If we were on the jury, we would convict too.
August 24th, 1989. A sunny morning in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, home to many of the city's college students. In her apartment, an Emerson College sophomore gets ready for her summer job. It's a morning she'll never forget. Investigating a strange noise in the hallway, the young woman sees a man in front of her neighbor's apartment.
She explains that the neighbor's not home, and the strange man says, "Do you mind getting me a piece of paper and pencil so I can write a note?"
But when she returns, the man bursts into her apartment wielding a large screwdriver. He then forces the woman onto her roommate's bed.
And threatened to kill her if she didn't cooperate.
He robbed her and he repeatedly raped her over a period of about 1 hour.
Finally, the attacker relents. He tears out the phone cord and disappears. The victim finds a friend to take her to the hospital. There, medical staff prepare a rape kit, including vaginal swabs from the victim. The crime is reported to the police.
And a sexual assault unit detective was sent to the hospital to meet the victim, talk to her about the case.
The detective and her team then head to the crime scene to look for evidence.
They were able to collect a bed sheet that appeared to have semen stains on it.
The next day at the police station, the victim begins searching for her attacker. A black male, 5'10", 150 pounds, with a short afro and a mustache.
The victim looked at several different photographs and mug books.
And she looked through those books one after the other.
And apparently was not able to identify the perpetrator.
But a rapist is at large, and the police do not give up. They keep working with the victim, but after several weeks, with no progress, they prepare a composite sketch. Finally, a possible break. The face in the sketch resembles a man police have arrested before.
One or more officers in the precinct said, "Hey, that looks a little bit like a guy named Neil Miller, who I stopped the other day."
23-year-old Neil Miller has a record of petty crimes. Police locate his mugshot and create a photo array.
And the victim identified him as the perpetrator.
Police hit the streets on a manhunt for Miller. But after several weeks, the search goes cold. Until an unrelated arrest changes everything. Police pick up a young African-American man for fighting outside a local bar. At the station, the man is reluctant to identify himself.
I gave him a false name because I owed $50 to Roxbury Court.
But the officer presses Miller for the truth.
He was like, "You know what, you look like someone we're looking for." And I was like, "Okay, well, my name is Neil Miller, check it out."
The officer does check it out. Moments later, he makes a shocking accusation.
He was like, "Yup, you're the guy we're looking for rape." And I was like, "Okay, you know, you can stop playing." He was like, "You are wanted for rape." And he showed me the paper that was typed out.
Miller is booked for raping the Emerson student.
I'm like, yo, you better go check this one more time, man, because I didn't rape nobody.
My sister called me and told me that he had got arrested, and we were just like, we didn't believe it.
He just didn't strike me as that type of person.
But the victim maintains that Neil Miller is her attacker.
And I started getting scared, and I started to cry.
He was held at the jail, and we went to visit him within a day or two. But we didn't think, he would be convicted on it.
And I was just like, I don't think I'm getting out of this. Once I found out that it was a white woman, I was like, there's no way. I'm already guilty.
Neil Miller's case goes to trial in 1990.
Unless the person looks at me and says, no, he's not the one, and that's not him, then I'm done.
But in court, the victim once again identifies Miller as the man who raped her.
She's expressing extraordinary certainty.
You will, as a jury, believe her when she says, I am absolutely certain that that's the man. It's a lot more compelling in some instances than, any host of scientific evidence.
And there's also scientific evidence against him. The swabs taken from the victim contain semen of the same blood type as Miller. After just 3 hours, the jury returns the verdict. Guilty. His sentence, 26 to 45 years in prison.
To hear it, it was like, damn, the whole world just blew up around me, and here I am just drifting.
He didn't do it.
The DA said it was a great win for the Commonwealth.
But for Neil, it feels like the end of his life. He's sent to Walpole, a maximum security prison infamous for hardcore criminals and murderous inmate assaults.
That first night was scary. Hearing the door go clang, that's when I cried again. Because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know anything.
In the end, Neil's only hope is the Innocence Project, a group of lawyers and law students dedicated to using DNA evidence to free the innocent. But will they believe him?
The person may or may not be innocent. You don't really know. And your job is not to be a jury or a judge. But human nature is going to have you wondering about it.
So who are they going to believe? The young college student who came to Massachusetts for an education and got raped?
Or a man with a prior record? And even if the Innocence Project believes him, what chance do they have against the victim's own ID?
The victim believed this was the person who did this to her.
When we return. In 1990, Neil Miller is sentenced to 26 to 45 years in prison for raping a college student, a crime he swears he did not commit. The key evidence against him, the compelling eyewitness ID from the victim herself.
There's a victim who's absolutely certain this is the man who raped her.
And was like, yeah, that's him. That's all that they really needed.
But if the victim is so certain Miller is her attacker, how can he possibly be innocent?
The problem is she's mistaken. She's wrong.
The Innocence Project believes the problem started at the outset of the investigation.
One is that you don't wait several weeks to do a composite sketch.
Memory is not a videotape recorder, and 5 days, 10 days, a month or two later, you can't just retrieve it exactly as you saw it.
Retired Detective Paul Carroll trains officers around the country on proper eyewitness procedures.
We try to train also to treat your eyewitness evidence just like it's trace evidence, that it can deteriorate over time.
Because the more you allow time to pass, the more new material, new information is coming into that witness's mind, which can corrupt the original image.
That's exactly what they think happened in the Miller case.
Then they showed her photos first.
Hundreds of photographs of young black men.
Psychology professor Gary Wells is an expert on eyewitness evidence and its pitfalls.
There's a tendency to believe that whatever you come up with in your head must be coming out of memory, when in fact a lot of things come from imagination, maybe trying to figure out things like eye color, when in fact they don't have eye color information in their memory at all. But then they'll start to kind of fill it in because they have a psychological need for a more complete picture.
And another factor here, which is huge, is that it's cross-racial.
Cross-race identifications are especially difficult.
It is more difficult to individualize and distinguish people of a different race than it is to distinguish people of our own race.
We've shown that in research over many, many years. It is mainly experience. When you ask a white person to describe another African American that they've seen, they'll say, he was black. As if there weren't degrees or shades of brown and so on, more subtle things that other African Americans will notice.
And in addition to that challenge, the victim's sketch wasn't drawn until nearly a month after the attack.
And then finally, in the middle of September, they sat her down with the police composite artist.
It was that sketch that put police on Miller's trail.
One of the problems I see with composites a lot of the time is that they generate a lot of leads for you. And when a police officer says, "Hey, detective, I know who that is," there's a lot of internal pressure on the investigator then to prove that this is the suspect. So instead of looking for a suspect, now we have a suspect and we build a case around him.
And the detective then decided that, well, you know, if there's a resemblance, why not get a picture of Neil Miller?
But something critical is overlooked.
Instead of taking a recent picture of Neil Miller at the time was about 23 years old.
They go and get an older photo, which more closely matches the composites, as opposed to trying to match what the suspect looks like at the time.
Police claim there wasn't a more recent photo of Miller on file. Neil and the Innocence Project claim otherwise.
He had been arrested for a couple of minor offenses for which his picture was taken just 13 days before the August 24th raid.
Furthermore, the Innocence Project points out that the photo ID itself was tainted.
When they showed the victim this array, the victim looked at it for a while and then took Neil Miller's picture and put it to the side.
She then pulls out a second picture and puts it to the side.
And so the detective apparently at that point said, "It's my experience that, you know, first impressions often are the right ones. What's your first impression?"
The victim picks Neil Miller.
Memory is a reconstitutive process, and therefore, if you do suggestions as the retrieval process is going on, you're going to get mistakes.
You don't want to have the detective who's running the rape investigation run the identification procedure.
Especially when you already have a suspect and you think you know who it is.
If the officer doesn't know who the suspect is, then you can't make that kind of mistake.
The police arrest Neil Miller. But something is not quite right.
And what the detective notices when she picks him up in November is that this guy, this 23-year-old man, looks nothing like the photograph of a 16-year-old that was shown to this victim.
If we go after him because he looks like the composite and then we arrest him and contemporaneously he doesn't look like the composite, that should ring a bell.
So what does she do? She creates a new array, this time with a very